Here.
Mattson.
Here.
Oatmeal.
Here.
Stevens.
Here.
Bickner.
Here.
Seymour.
Here.
Richter.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Amen. So item number 1, work session on sales tax and general fund operations. We're calling Andrea for staff reports.
Well, good afternoon, Mr. Mayor and Commissioners. Thank you so much for your time and attention to this really important topic, which of course is sales tax, our main source of revenue for a city's general operations, including all aspects of community development, public safety, and transportation we provide to our citizens. You did find in your spots handouts, and I will speak to each one of those as we go through this presentation. So before we really dive into the matter of municipal sales tax, I would like to just recall the regulatory framework within which the city of Shawnee operates. Given the choice of 2 options, Shawnee adopted the method of the annual budgeting prescribed under Title 11 of the Oklahoma Statutes, Section 17, and that is referred to as the Municipal Budget Act. This act governs the way the city prepares, publicizes, adopts, and then also administers its budget, along with very specific annual due dates. Alongside the Municipal Budget Act, the city also has chosen to adopt budgeting and financial planning policies in March of 2022, which provide further guidance to how we develop our annual budget. Very important provisions of those policies are that the city will not borrow from external funding sources for operations, that we are not using our fund balance, any leftover money from prior years for ongoing operations. However, those fund balances could be programmed for one-time expenditures. And all funds that support operations must have a reserve. In the case of our general fund, that is 14 to 20%. Other operational funds, that reserve is set as 5 to 20%. In addition to that, all operating funds must also have a contingency reserve, because you never know what fuel prices do, so 2% was set aside as contingency for that. When the city develops the budget, we look at different revenue sources. They are all evaluated and then assigned according to their availability and potential use restrictions. We're dealing with 3 different types of revenues. The recurring revenue can reasonably be assumed to be there every single year, and it is therefore used as the basis for ongoing operations and particularly personnel cost. Recurring revenues include, of course, our sales and use tax. They include water, sewage, and garbage collection fees, license and permit fees, rental, and also interest income. And in this current 24-25 budget, across all funds, these recurring revenues account for approximately 34.6% of our total budget. The city also has access to periodic revenues. They're tied to either a specific time period or a specific purpose. For example, our 2018 half-cent sales tax, it is in place until 2028, or the downtown tax increment financing districts, which also have a sunset date. These revenue sources are related again to certain eligibility requirements, such as our community development block grant. All in all, these periodic revenues only account for 3.2% of our total budget this year. And then we have one-time revenues, which are either associated with fund balances, special disbursements, specific project loans, specific grant applications, or donations. These one-time revenues account for over 62% of our current year budget, and once spent, these revenues will not renew. So think ARPA funding or Oklahoma Water Resources Board loans. Once those funds have been expended, our budget will shrink significantly in the future. Leading me to the next slide and your first handout. There is a listing on this slide of all of these different funds, and you will recognize several of these names on this sheet. That is our budget summary for this current year. Again, the city budget consists of various funds, And the only ones that are not called out on the slide are the 4 funds for the Shawnee Municipal Authority and the 1 fund for the Shawnee Airport Authority. Highlighted here is the general fund, although it is just one of many, many funds the city administers. It is the one that supports all of the operations for the city departments, with the exception of water and sewer, municipal works, and of course the airport. So unlike the general fund, many of these other funds that you see on that slide, they are restricted and may not be used for other purposes. All of those are clearly marked with a red asterisk. Many of these restricted funds are set up either by state law, underlying public votes, or they are simply restricted by policy that was passed by the City Commission. In the case of a public vote, for example, you see that we have a fire and a police sales tax. The voters voted those in, and they can only be used for public safety purposes and nothing else. Other funds are set up to ensure that we are tracking the specific revenue streams, because a lot of times those are tied to grant funds that have specific eligibility requirements, and we may not divert those to other purposes. And you just heard me say that the general fund is that one fund that supports the operations of the majority of city departments. All of the city departments, all of the divisions that are supported by just the general fund are shown on this slide. And this general fund pays for the employees, all employee associated costs and benefits, all necessary functional and operations, the needed supplies, the materials, and also necessary service contracts that support these major functional areas. Again, not included here are water and sewer municipal works or the airport, because they have their own funds. Set up as enterprise funds, the Shawnee Municipal Authority and the Shawnee Airport Authority are primarily self-supporting through user fees, service charges, and other revenues that are specific to the services both of those provide. So, as mentioned previously, for today's work session, we will specifically focus on the general fund. Again, this is the city's most flexible fund because it is not tied to any one purpose. As you can see from this information, the general fund has 2 main revenue sources. The first and foremost being sales and use tax, which brought in $15.5 million in sales tax and $4.3 million in use tax for the last fiscal year. That is your handout number 2 in that first package you received. In comparison to these, and then secondly, we have, of course, the transfer in from the Shawnee Municipal Authority, which is, again, our water and sewer municipal works, and that transfer in constitutes 82.4% of the transfer in amount. The remaining transfer in is from the police and fire sales tax. That is then pushed into the appropriate budgets in the general fund for use for police and fire. In comparison to these 2 revenue streams, both the sales and use tax and the transfers in, the budgeted expenditures for public safety, for example, fire and police accounted for over $18 million both in fiscal year 24 and fiscal year 25, and taking up just over 86% of our anticipated unrestricted sales and use tax, as well as the fire and police tax. So in other words, without the infusion of the Shawnee Municipal Authority money, the transfer in of $4.56 million, our general fund would have insufficient money to actually support the operation of all of the other departments that are supported by the general fund. Let's for a moment focus on sales and the accompanying use tax. Oklahoma is the only state in the nation in which municipalities are almost entirely dependent on sales tax for general operations funding, including all personnel costs. And you may remember that from the previous slide. We get 75% of our general fund from taxes, then 18% from the transfer in, and so the user fees we create and the service charges we create are a small 7%. Unless we increase user and service fees, we are primarily relying on user tax, on sales and use tax. This is very, very significant because the general fund, being so heavily reliant on sales and use tax, is also the fund out of which we pay employee costs, which usually account for 75% of our general fund expenditures. Within the state of Oklahoma, as you can see from this slide, municipalities are the only general government entity that does not really have a diversified revenue stream for its general operations. That leaves cities and towns very vulnerable to market fluctuations and particularly to any shifts in consumer spending. As you know, Shawnee's combined sales tax rate is 9.995%, just under the 10% mark. This rate is a combination of sales tax implemented by 3 different entities. 4.5% goes to the state, 1.495% to the county, and 4% actually goes to the city. The state of Oklahoma receives the largest portion of the sales tax collected in Shawnee. The current rate of 4.5% and how the funds are utilized by the state is established by state law. And although the allocations may change a little bit every year, what you see on this slide was how those were divvied out in fiscal year 2024. And of course, that rate of 4.5% is applied statewide, not just within the city limits of Shawnee or within Pottawatomie County. The sales tax rate applied by Pottawatomie County is 1.495. The maximum county rate allowed under the Oklahoma statutes is 2%. In Pottawatomie County, 1% is a permanent sales tax, which was approved by voters in August of 2008. The funding is dispersed to 12 purposes, and the largest categories there are county roads and bridges at 60%, the Pottawatomie County Public Safety Center at 20%, and Pottawatomie County Fire Departments at 7%. The remaining 13%, I know it is listed on the slide, but I will not read this. Of course, the rate of 1.495% is applied countywide. Here it is particularly important to note that 75% of the county sales taxes are collected within the city of Shawnee, which based on fiscal year 24 receipts is just under $11.8 million. And I would also like to share that the city of Shawnee maintains roadways and bridges within the city limits, while the county has assisted us with $25,000 for the rebuilding of Leo Street. They paved 1 mile of Wolverine Road for us, and they offered the city the use of the Brangus Road right-of-way for the wastewater treatment force main, and we are grateful for their assistance. The city also pays daily incarceration rates for all municipal inmates at the Pottawatomie County Public Safety Center. And just between July and November of this year, the city has paid just under $24,000 for this service. And lastly, 30% of our fire suppression calls occur outside of the city limits, but within the very large fire district that was assigned to the city. And for its expenditures, the Shawnee Fire Department receives approximately $203,000 every year from the county, which accounts for approximately 2.9% of the fire department's operating budget, but not including capital expenditures, which, for example, for the year equal $3.35 million. And then many of our residents do not know that the city of Shawnee only collects 4% of our combined sales tax. 2% of that is a permanent tax that was approved in 1976. These unrestricted funds are the ones that are used for our general fund operations. The city has an additional 1% permanent tax, which also was approved by the voters in March of 1999. That money is used for capital improvements, economic development, and debt services, and 1/8 of that is actually the police and fire sales tax that I spoke of earlier. Then, in addition, we have a half-a-cent temporary 10-year sales tax, which was approved by the voters in June of 2018. Those funds are allocated only for capital improvements to public safety, streets and roads, and then, of course, parks and public facilities. So a lot of the recent capital improvements that we were able to do come out of that half-cent sales tax. And then the remaining half-cent permanent tax was approved by the voters last year. This half-cent tax is specifically for capital improvements, and it is currently used as the collateral for our wastewater treatment loan that we receive from the Oklahoma Water Resources Board. For the next 30 years, that money is tied up as the repayment for the loan. And this is what this looks like when you put all those sales taxes together, state, county, as well as city. And then we looked at the top 15 cities across the state, of which Shawnee is number 14. This chart again shows the top 15, Oklahoma City, of course, being on the left as the largest, and Bixby finishing on the right, just a little smaller than we are. As previously noted, the state's 4.5% is applied statewide, so you see the same blue bar all across the bottom section of those graphs. And then the next section is the applicable county sales tax, which is shown in orange. And then on top of that, in green, is the city's individual sales tax rates. Out of those 15 cities, Shawnee currently has the highest combined sales tax rate at 9.995%, followed by Stillwater with 9.313. The lowest combined sales tax rate is currently within Broken Arrow at 8.417. Now, when we're backing out the state and the city taxes and compare only the sales tax rate applied by the 15 largest counties, and this is the graph. Potawatomi County by population is the 9th largest in the state. Here we see that only Rogers County is slightly higher as they have a sales tax rate of 1.500%. And of course, Oklahoma County has the lowest at 0%. Across the top 15 counties, the average sales tax rate for counties is 0.709%. in comparison to Potawatomi County at 1.495. Showing a slightly different comparison here of Potawatomi County to its closest peers in population, so 5 up, 5 down. Potawatomi County again has one of the highest county sales tax rates, only overtaken by Rogers County, who is 0.005% higher. Now let's back out the state and county taxes and compare only sales tax rates applied by the cities. Here we see that Midwest City has the highest municipal sales tax at 4.6, and Bartlesville has the lowest at 3.4. The average across all top 15 cities is 3.97%, and the city of Shawnee has 4.0. This illustrates the impact that a combined sales tax rate has on our residents, which I do believe is significant to note. Here again, a slightly different comparison of Shawnee to its closest peers, again, by population, 5 above us and 5 below the size of Shawnee. Shawnee is right in the middle of these peers in all respects. What I've also included on this slide, and that you see in that additional column that was not listed for the county, was the number of regular employees. And whenever available, shown in the slightly gray font, are the numbers for part-time or seasonal employees, just for comparison purposes. Based on the size of the city's workforces, there are a few interesting things to ascertain. From among these 10 peers, Shawnee is below average in employees, both by population and by square miles. I apologize, I do not mean to bump into this mic. And as I was avidly reading just in case you're interested, all of these sales tax rates are taken directly from the latest quarterly publication from the Oklahoma Tax Commission. That is the third portion of the first handout. So under the Oklahoma Municipal Budget Act, Shawnee is required to develop comprehensive financial statements every year, and we also have an independent financial audit. As part of Shawnee's resulting annual comprehensive financial report, we also track some very important metrics. And what you see on the slide is the city's growth trends between 2014 and 2023. The city has experienced growth in population, in revenues, and of course in operational costs. Where we have not grown is in our workforce. And you may ask why that is. It is because retaining our current employees always comes first. Secondly, we look at operational functionality because we must preserve that in order to be effectual. And so we have to fund our equipment, supplies, and critical service contracts. And these two top considerations are essential for the continued operations and core functionality of our city. Then what you see below the line is what we can consider as we develop our budget. Do we have the ability to give a cost of living adjustment in order to keep up with inflation? And some years we do, and other years we don't. Then we look at how can we invest in our employees through continued training and professional growth. And then we look at what potential program and procedure changes can we implement that could make us better functioning, more efficient and effective. And then lastly, we weigh new position requests only against any remaining recurring revenues. And at this time, there are several city departments whose position requests have remained unfilled for several years in a row. Sales and use tax are, frankly speaking, not keeping up with inflation, and they hamper our ability to grow city operations. And I know that most of you know that very, very well. Furthermore, it has prevented us from providing cost of living adjustments outside of our scheduled 2.5% merit increase for our non-union employees for the last 3 years. And even in 2021, it was an increase that was very specifically applied to positions that were wholly undervalued in comparison to other positions offered across the city. For our unionized employees within the fire and police department, we evaluate every year peer city collective bargaining agreements. But for the last 2 years, we have also found ourselves in a very tight financial situation. The most recent round of union negotiations went as far as reaching an agreement with both unions to share sales tax receipts above projections. As soon as a trigger threshold would be reached, a cost of living increase would be implemented. However, for the fire union, for example, that cost of living increase threshold was already surpassed and we reached the November sales tax and it was not at the threshold where it would have triggered their cost of living adjustment, just simply because our sales tax has not been performing as well as we had hoped. So let me recap very quickly some of the things that I presented to you. In comparison to its municipal peers, the city operates truly with a skeletal workforce. In comparison to county peers, Potawatomi County has the second highest sales tax rate by 0.005%. Given the current combined sales tax rate of 9.995% within Shawnee, the biggest concern voiced by voters during the 2023 sales tax vote, education and outreach sessions that were conducted, was that 10% sales tax, or a sales tax over 10%, would effectively drive visitors and residents away because of the cost that it would add to goods and services. So given this concern, it is highly unlikely that residents would approve any additional sales tax increase for operational funding for the city of Shawnee if that was to push the sales tax rate over 10%. In terms of future outlook, We do know that the City of Shawnee General Fund heavily relies on the transfer in of the funds from the Shawnee Municipal Authority, our water and sewer municipal works. Given the recent and much-needed updates to our water treatment plants, which was of course completed just last year, and our wastewater treatment operations, which will be completed at the end of next year or early 2026, the SMA transfers to the general fund will have to be reduced in order to carry the increased debt load that will come our way as particularly the water treatment plant project continues. Furthermore, even before the increased debt load that will grow through fiscal year 2029 and then thereafter stabilize, the SMA's funding only afforded the city a 150-year replacement schedule for assets, as in water and sewer lines, that usually last no more than 70 years in the best of circumstances. So given this dire operational funding picture for the city, the state's current revenue restrictions for municipalities will have to be evaluated and potentially restructured. But as you know, all legislative processes usually take a few years to line up, so I'm not sure that all of that will line up with our decreased transfers in that we are projecting from the SMA into the general fund. And then, of course, with the growing gap between available revenues and the operational cost, we have already streamlined many of our city procedures, and the city may have to consider more drastic measures in the future, such as not filling vacant positions or decreasing services if it truly comes to that. Other potential cost-cutting measures would likely have to include the deferral of maintenance and repairs, which, as you know, from prior deferrals, it creates long-term issues for the city to solve thereafter. So we would literally just be kicking the can down the road. And last but not least, the city's inability to appropriately fund its workforce and keep up with its peers, it will greatly impact our ability to retain or attract employees. I can tell you that is an increasing issue. Because unlike private businesses, we cannot just increase our revenue sources unless we are willing to really roll out heavy fee increases. I do understand that that was a lot of information to take in, but I'd be happy to answer any questions you have for me.
County Commissioners, any idea why they're not here?
I do not know, no.
Okay. Were they invited?
I had specifically sent the information about the special call meeting to Commissioner Dennis.
Okay. Did we get it to them in time?
I would hope so. I received a response back on that email.
Okay. Any questions here? This end?
None for
I know
me.
Chris does.
No, I mean, this is, I've read this beforehand, and then, you know, we've kind of known for a while that we are the only state in the country that receives most of our general fund from sales tax, and we keep asking more sales tax, and, you know, you know, there's a few business owners up here. We also know that also hurts business, you know, so and we are the largest city, Potawatomi County, so obviously we're going to raise the most amount of sales tax, and we desperately need another solution. So, but thank you for your presentation.
I mean, my take on it, the county tax is killing us. You know, and you hate to take money away from them, but, you know, 75% of the money's generated here in Shawnee. And then, you know, you sit and look outside north of town here where you have all these houses getting built outside of city limits. They're getting 1.5% on every bit of that. We're supplying fire fort, lease for it, and get nothing in return for it. So, I think we need to sit down at the table with all the entities and come to some kind of mutual agreement on how best to remedy it. I mean, just like we need a fire department out there, but we don't have the money to do it. But they're getting money in sales tax revenues that, they're using for roads and whatever else, because that's what it's specifically designed to do. So it's a mess.
Anybody else? Okay. I guess we will adjourn and umpire the chair. And we'll go to SAA, Shawnee Airport Authority agenda. Oops. So it's wanting me to do roll call again. We don't have to do that, do we?
We don't have to do roll call. And I hear I'm showing the drawings, but not those that have voting. Everybody is in.
Okay. Now do a work session on Shawnee Regional Airport, development, restoration, and maintenance projects. And we'll call on Bonnie Wilson, Airport Manager, for staff report.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Mayor, Commissioners. Appreciate the time today and the special call. I'm afraid I have a presentation as well. So I'll try to get through it as quickly as we can. I do think it's kind of important, and some of it you may have seen before. So at the request of this body, Mr. Grayson Ardiz, Executive Director of the Oklahoma Department of Aerospace and Aeronautics, made a presentation to the Airport Advisory Board on the proposed capital improvement plan for the Shawnee Regional Airport. This item on today's special call meeting is designed to share the highlights of Mr. Ardiz's presentation, the AAB's questions and comments, and Mr. Ardiz's responses and recommendations in relation to those plans. Mr. Ardiz began his presentation with a statement regarding the pro-growth agenda formulated by ODOT in support of the aviation industry in Oklahoma. He stated that several of the projects he was presenting were under consideration prior to the storm events of 2023, and now, due to the impact of that storm on our airport, new opportunities and projects have been identified. Mr. Ardiz presented the projects in federal fiscal year order, beginning with fiscal year 2025. He noted that the current plan is to undertake both design and construction of the first 4 projects within the remaining months of fiscal year 2025. In keeping with the FAA's standard format for CIPs, a lot of acronyms, Federal Aviation Administration's standard format for capital improvement programs, each project is assigned an overall development objective, or ODO, number, supplemented further by project schedule and likely sources of funding. So to keep it straight, I'm going to go ahead and use those ODO numbers to make sure we're all talking about the same project, because they have a lot of very similar descriptive language. The first project that he spoke to is ODO number 1, Rehabilitate Taxi Lane. Mr. Ardiz noted the scope of this project was changed from the planned rehabilitation of the pavement rated currently as fair, as shown in the blue and yellow sections of your slide, to a more limited crack repair and seal coat, which he believes will preserve this pavement for another 5 to 7 years. He also noted the original project plan submitted to the FAA would be a costly investment in pavement that would likely need to be relocated or reconfigured to accommodate a future parking apron expansion. Mr. Ardiz noted further that while the current layout location of taxi lane is a deviation from the most current FAA pavement standards and presents a concern in its current format, these concerns could be addressed when and if a future project allowed for a reconfiguration of the main parking apron. It's a safety geometry issue, the distances between the different types of pavements and the types of aircraft that use them for different purposes. Second project on the list is actually the second and third, my apologies, would be the new T-hanger taxi lane and the construction of new T-hangers where the two projects, and one is ODO2 and one is ODO3. I've combined them because they are attached. It just make a little bit more sense. If you need me to revisit any portions of it, I certainly will. Mr. Ardis raised the concern about reconstructing the 200 Series T hangars in their original location that's depicted in the red area on the slide. These would be the T hangars that were damaged beyond repair by the tornado event, and they have since been demolished. While current FAA standards do not require the pavement in this area to be widened, he felt that constructing a new taxi lane adjacent to the west T hangar taxi lane that is in existence, the yellow area on your slide, would be in compliance with FAA standards and offer a safer operating environment for aircraft. So the red has been demolished, the blue exists, and the yellow is the planned future. The current ODA CIP indicates construction of 20 T hangars to replace the 18 that were damaged by the April 2023 storm. ODAA estimates the total cost of that project at $4,205,000, with ODAA contributing 5% of the cost of constructing the taxi lane, which is the pavement and foundation areas, and 40% of the cost of constructing the hangars themselves. Mr. Ardis noted that if there was a reduction in support from either the Federal Emergency Management Agency or insurance reimbursement based on the plan to reconstruct in a new location, ODAA was prepared to support the project at a higher financial level to address any of those funding shortfalls that could occur. Mr. Ardis then suggested that the pavement supporting the old 200 T hangars, again the red area, could be reused to support a series of box hangars, smaller box hangars for larger aircraft. This reuse of the pavement for construction of box hangars is not currently included in the proposed CIP, and there was no discussion of funding to support a reuse project. Moving on to the next project, project ODO number 4, construct taxi lane for southeast hangar development. Mr. Ardis again indicated this area had been identified by the state of Oklahoma for the purpose of industrial development in support of the aviation industry in the state. He indicated that $6.5 million in state funds had been allocated to support development, beginning with the taxi lane leading to and from the existing parallel taxiway Alpha. So as you see the bend in the yellow, it attaches to existing pavement, which is the current parallel taxiway to the primary runway. There's a lot of technical stuff, and I'm hoping the pictures help, but please feel free to stop me if they don't. Having introduced the 4 projects planned for the remainder of this fiscal year, Mr. Ardis paused his presentation to take questions from the AAV members. I'll summarize those for you. A request was made to clarify the term matching funds identified in the ODAA CIP, specifically what type of funding can be used for this purpose. Mr. Ardis offered clarification that the matching share of funds needed for the projects could come from any source other than the FAA directly. The timing of the new plan was questioned primarily in relation to any resolution of FEMA and insurance negotiations and the availability of those funding resources. Mr. Ardis offered that any funding shortfalls would be addressed with ODA's financial assistance. Another concern raised by the AAV was the order of the projects. It was stated that the primary pavements, the runway, parallel taxiway, and connecting taxiways, had recently been assessed for their weight-bearing capacity, surface and subsurface conditions through a study funded by ODAA, and that would be the pavement condition report that we shared with this group. The pavement condition rating report indicated the need to begin addressing those areas to retain our current weight-bearing or landed weight capacity. If rehabilitation could not be funded in the near future, another option would be to begin reducing the allowable weight for aircraft seeking to use the runway. This discussion generated a follow-on question regarding the development of the draft CIP document in relation to the pavement study. Mr. Ardis offered the CIP was developed after the pavement study was concluded. Mr. Ardis also recommended that the AAV and this body seek the funding necessary to improve and strengthen the runway and taxiway system through a special federal allocation. Questions were raised regarding eligibility and the use of Progressing Rural Economic Prosperity, or PREP funds, for primary pavement projects. Mr. Ardis reviewed the history of that PREP authorization and appropriations process to date. He suggested that if a PREP program is authorized by the state of Oklahoma, this could be a source of funding for future projects, but that a continuation of the PREP program and associated funding has not yet been confirmed. So the state is considering it, but there's no firm answer as to whether there'll be, I think he referred to it as Prep 2.0. He again stated that any request for prep funds should be addressed to the AAB SAA state representative for their consideration. Comments were offered regarding the need for airport capital funds to support locally funded projects that were not included in the ODAA proposed CIP document. Mr. Ardis requested additional information regarding the full list of those projects. The copy of the letter that you have includes that list, and it will also be part of this presentation. He offered ODAA financial support to address the cost of our PAPI upgrade project at 95% and a new fuel farm project at 50%, but again, asked for more details on the other projects that were slated or under consideration so he could review those. We did provide that list of projects and available cost estimates via email the following day. We went back to the list of projects at this point. We're ODO 5 and 6. Mr. Ardis continued. He began with a review of ODO 5, which is the terminal design and construction, and ODO 6, the design of the new parking area for the terminal. Mr. Ardis recognized that FEMA funding could be impacted, again, by relocating the terminal generally to the east of its original location. But he stressed that this new location would allow for future apron expansion in 3 cardinal directions, which he thought was beneficial. And again, offered ODAA support to cover any funding shortages that we may face as a result of doing this as an alternative project. Moving on, Mr. Ardis then moved to the remaining 2 projects ODAA proposes for fiscal year 2026. This is 7 and 8, construction of the southeast hangar and apron, and construction of the southeast roadway and utilities to support that development area. Mr. Ardis explained that these projects were a part of the plan to, again, increase and support aviation businesses in Oklahoma. He noted that the hangar proposed in the plan was conceptual, and that any final plan would reflect this body's preferences for what they'd like to see built down there. One large building is currently in the plan, but several smaller ones could be an option if that was the decision. But he iterated very clearly the focus for any of those buildings needs to be to support industry, commercial use, and again, that also might be important for ensuring any kind of prep funding. Mr. Ardis paused his presentation again to take further questions and comments. At this point, all of the members of the AAB supported the idea of a new terminal. Questions were raised regarding options to rebuild the terminal on a smaller scale, save money on construction, as well as ongoing maintenance and operations costs. Mr. Ardis cautioned that any alternative construction plans, again, could impact the FEMA funding portion of that equation, though ODAA is willing to assist us with funding as necessary to address any of those shortfalls. Additional questions and comments about the Southeast development centered around the cost of the investment in these projects versus the need to invest in primary pavements, and how the use of airport capital for these projects will impact on airport capital and operations funds identified to address the locally funded projects. Mr. Ardis then continued his presentation with ODO number 9. This is the plan to strengthen runway 1735 and the taxiways, both the connecting as well as the parallels. As noted previously, the cost of this project is well above the standard entitlement funds that FAA provides to the Shawnee Airport, which is about $150,000 a year. Mr. Ardis recommended the SAA seek assistance from their congressional delegation for special discretionary FAA funding for this project, and also for the next project, which is the reconstruction design for the terminal apron. Again, Mr. Ardis recommended the SAA seek assistance from the congressional delegation for special discretionary FAA funding for this project, as aircraft parking aprons are not high on the priority list for the FAA. It was during the discussion of this project that concerns related to the need to build a new fuel farm were raised again. Mr. Ardis reiterated the ODAA has funds to support 50% of the cost of a new fuel farm. And that pretty well concluded the projects on the CIP. So the next phase of this discussion is going to get to that list of projects that were identified that were called locally funded. So switching gears. Members of the AAB advised Ms. Dargis of their concerns regarding redirection of available capital and operational funds away from the locally funded projects. The next group of slides provides information on our ongoing restoration and maintenance projects, otherwise referred to as the locally funded, generally supported by airport direct revenues. These projects have been included in the City of Shawnee Capital Improvement Program. Some of the smaller projects and equipment purchases have been on the Airport Advisory Board's rolling 5-year construction and maintenance plans. The new fuel farm is also on this list, though it was included in part of the planned terminal apron project submitted to the FAA for funding in March of 2022. First project on the list, and I know you've heard about this before, is the PAPI upgrade project. The current system is approximately 27 years old. Weather exposure and time have created issues with corrosion, leading to electrical issues. The colored lenses are faded, making them hard to discern during daylight hours. FAA test pilots regularly register their concerns with the functionality of the equipment as they use our airfield to test their aircraft and their pilots. Occasionally, they'll issue out a NOTAM on my behalf to let me know they're not working as well as they might. Funds to support the design required for an upgrade to the new LED type of equipment were included in the FY 2025 Airport Authority capital budget. The estimated cost of the project to include in design and construction is $300,000. At the AB meeting, Mr. Dargis did offer to support 50% of the cost of this project. The next major one, of course, is again the relocation of the new fuel farm. It was installed originally in 1998. The tanks and piping are beginning to show corrosion from weather exposure. The project to build a new replacement fuel farm was first included in the CIP submitted to the FAA in March of 2022 as part of the apron expansion project, then scheduled for design in 25 with construction to follow in 26. The plan was to add the fuel farm as a bid alternate to the larger project and address those costs using Shawnee Airport Authority funds. When the plan was submitted, FAA and ODAA requested the project be delayed by 1 year, so we resubmitted a new CIP in September of 2022, showing the apron expansion project design in 2026 and construction in 2027. The estimated cost of constructing the new fuel farm is $1.5 million. And again, Mr. Dargis offered to provide ODAA funds to support 50% of the fuel farm portion of the cost of that project. This next one is an area of the airport that was brought to us by the Navy. And as you can see from the pictures, it's showing its age. The plan for this project is in response to a formal filing with the FAA's Airports District Office. The FAA issued a compliance order to correct the pavement in this area in April of 2023, just before the storm. At their March 18, 2024 meeting, the Shawnee Airport Authority directed the staff to engage in maintenance activities on this south ramp area, and then the tornado hit. And so we have had some patience and extension from the FAA, but it is high on their priority is to be addressed. The current engineer's estimated cost to repair just this area that's depicted in the red is $3,740,525. Next one's a little smaller, a little less expensive, which is a shed for our tractor. The project was initially identified in the Airport Advisory Board's 5-year plan in 2021 for purchase and construction in 2022. And staff began that process of planning and designing, but was delayed by the FAA's, and this is very ironic, obstruction office. And the obstruction office and the environmental review office have delayed that project, and it remains pending and waiting for funds to become available. The estimated cost of constructing the foundation and the equipment shed is around $25,000. But right now, our beautiful tractor is sitting out in the world as a result. This is near and dear to my heart. This is our aircraft tug. You may think that it's a golf cart, and it is, but we don't use it for that. We use it for moving around our airplanes. And it's been helping us move around our airplanes since 2009. And it too is beginning to show its age. Funds to purchase the new golf cart or utility type tractor, Gator style. I don't want to put a brand name on it. Were included in the FY 2025 Airport Authority capital equipment budget. The estimated cost is now around $15,000. Amazingly enough, Hangar 14 survived the tornado. Prior to the tornado, the plans to repair and rehabilitate the hangar were in the AAB's 5-year rolling plan. Repairs and replacement of insulation were estimated at around $50,000. The abandoned fans and vent hoods on the north wall were further damaged, unfortunately, by the tornado winds. Now we have active openings for weather and birds to enter the hangar. The associated costs for repairs are estimated around $25,000. We have three metal halide lights have been replaced with LED fixtures. They're much more functional. They stay lit a lot longer. Unfortunately, the remaining halide lights have failed, and so we're operating on 3 LEDs. They're very, very efficient, and they're very costly to install, but easy to operate. They're very bright, and so we're not trying to go for a 1-to-1. Right now, we're down to 3 lights in the hangar. We're looking for about $8,000 to purchase a few more and have them installed. They do have to be wired by an electrician. The $100,000 to repair the overhead east and west doors was included in the 2025 capital budget, but the doors were severely damaged by the tornado, and we're seeking insurance support to replace them at this time. Our parking lot was constructed in 1992. The last major maintenance was taking place in 2012. We have exposed aggregate in many places. The joints are separating. We're looking for a crack and seal on this at about $10,000. Our remaining T hangars, the 100 series, were constructed in 1967. We have had a lot of unfortunate water damage, which eats away at the foundation and also worked away at the metal rails that the doors roll on or are supposed to roll on. In some cases, there's rails missing. Each year, we've put between $5,000 and $10,000 into our operating costs to try to get to 3 to possibly 5 of these to get them repaired. Unfortunate reality is that before the storm, we put about 8 of the 200 series back on their feet. And the 100 series are in pretty tough shape, but they were in better shape than the 200. So we'll still be looking for some support to get those going. They are actively leased, but they don't do much good if we can't get the planes in and out because the doors won't move. This is a new one. This was not on any prior lists because the need is recently identified by the loud noise it now makes when you turn right. This is our operations truck. The airport operates 1 operations truck and 2 courtesy or crew cars we make available to our customers when they arrive by air. The operations truck is what you see here. We use it daily for all our airfield related activities. It is equipped with an air-to-ground radio and spare fuel tank in the bed that we use to fuel our diesel equipment. Recently, the right front wheel bearing is giving indications that it needs to be replaced. There's body rust forming across it. It still operates. Funds will be needed for repairs or possible replacement. The current estimate for similar vehicles is between $35,000 and $40,000. This is one of our crew cars. And again, thank you to the water department for the truck, and thank you to the police department for the courtesy vehicle. As you can see, it's a 2010 Ford Expedition, a little worse for wear from the tornado and a variety of other uses. The other crew car we have is a 2013 single cab Chevy Silverado. Again, thank you to the water department for going to the drive-by meters and giving us a vehicle. This Expedition is still working. It needs an engine overhaul. The electric windows don't actually work, and there's significant body damage. OMAG totaled the vehicle after the storm and gave us a total of $6,425 for it. We estimate the replacement cost is around $40,000. Onto the storm damaged properties, and again, I apologize now on the front end of this by saying if we had better information we would give it, but as you know, we're still working through all of the storm damage and all of the estimates. The remaining slides address the properties that were damaged by the 2023 tornado event. We expect OMAG and FEMA funds will help address repairs. We don't have final agreements on their contributions and cannot accurately determine what portion of the work will need to be funded with Shawnee Airport Authority revenues. Certainly, we hope it will be less than more. We're back to hangar 14. The estimate to replace the east and west overhead doors is $200,000. We have damage to the wall panels, the heating system, and the electricity. Through some fairly talented licensed electrician work, we were able to isolate the electricity that services the corner that you can see that's so badly damaged. Unfortunately, by isolating that, we're no longer able to provide ground power services to our aircraft customers. OMAG has not yet agreed to repair a plan or provide a specific dollar amount. The cost to address the damages is still up in the air based on the assessments that they make and the determination they give us related to first OMAG, of course, and then FEMA for anything that needs to be covered in that gap. The 2 overhead doors that need full replacement now at this stage, we do have quotes for, and depending on which company we're able to work with and how much structural change is needed, we're looking at between $130,000 and $200,000 just for the doors. Speaking of doors, the doors to hangar 15 have yet to be found. It could be in Omaha, I don't really know. They weren't worth chasing down. Hangar 15 is owned by the Shawnee Airport Authority and was leased to a commercial entity. The doors were damaged beyond repair by the storm, and the tenant has since terminated their lease because the hangar is really just not functional, can't be secured. The insurance compensation offered for new doors is $45,888. Estimates from vendors to install new doors is $86,000. In addition, we are losing $6,300 a year in rental revenue while it remains in its current condition. Minor damage to the end of the 100 series T hangars. This is actually a little office. All the T hangars end up with this space on the end. And for about a year and a half, myself and my staff partners lived in one of these. I can tell you that they're better than my Fiat 500 as far as an office goes when you have to share the space, but they're pretty tight. And as you can see, the roof has been damaged, the wall has been damaged. We have not lost the lease on this because it is just a storage area. OMAG has offered us $15,700 to repair the wall and the roof. We don't have construction cost estimates for the repairs yet. The next major property is what we call the DPS Vive building. For those of you who have been in Shawnee longer than I have, you may remember it as being a National Guard facility, I think, before it became the Department of Public Safety, Driver's License Bureau, and by Broadband Spaces. The Shawnee Airport Authority owns the building. It's located at 1821 Airport Drive. Prior to the storm, the building was leased to the state of Oklahoma, DPS for driver's license, and in part to Vive Broadband. Both tenants have since terminated their leases. OMAG is providing $122,608 to repair the structural damage to the building. While it remains vacant and exposed to the elements, the cost of repair and interior restorations are of course increasing, and the rental revenue in the amount of $48,325 per year is also lost. Having brought all these projects forward, I would like to conclude with the conclusion that the Airport Advisory Board made in the form of a motion. At the conclusion of the meeting, following the discussion of the proposed ODA CIP, the list of local projects and storm damaged properties, the Airport Advisory Board passed a motion recognizing the value of the CIP plan presented by Mr. Ardiz. They also recommended the CIP for the airport be expanded to include the list of locally funded projects, and that the CIP be reviewed annually for any modifications to project plans and or prioritization of projects. The full text of the motion is provided on your screen and also in your handouts. I appreciate the time today to review the projects, and I'll be more than happy to answer any questions you may have.
I've got one on hangar 15. We're talking about only $6,300 a year in income off of that 7,500 square foot building or whatever it is. So that's kind of crazy. You're gonna spend $200,000 on doors, and it's gonna take you 30 years to, is that because it's for aeronautical use?
That is indeed correct, yes, sir. And then,
So if I wanted to rent it, it wouldn't be $525?
probably not. With all of our commercially, properties that could be used for commercial use, we follow the standard procedure established by the FAA by publishing a request for proposals. And we ask people who may have a commercial need, commercial use desire, to please submit a proposal. How would they use the facility if they were granted the lease? How much would we expect from revenue, direct revenue from rental, any business they would generate on behalf of the airport, which is usually in the form of fuel sales. And this does not specifically, FAA doesn't specifically cap what you can get for that, but it does have an impact on the overall market, and so the proposals we receive are usually in line with, well, I can rent the same hangar over here for this much, so I'd be looking to offer this much. And
I
we
guess-
did publish it, we did receive some proposals, and the rent we were getting for it was actually the highest rate offered.
The alarming part to me is you can't maintain it for $500 a month, and that's
And-
all we're getting for it.
Well, when I issued or worked with the tenant in question to negotiate the lease on this building, we did put the maintenance burden on them.
Yeah, I'm just, from a business standpoint, it's, you know, because we're looking, I don't know how many millions of dollars we're gonna spend out there at the cost to the city, and what kind of projected revenue would we have off that investment? Has anybody looked at that?
So if that was to be a maintenance and repair operation, that would bring in the regular airplanes that then need fuel. We make a good profit on the fuel that we resell, but not necessarily on the lease itself.
I think what you're
Which
talking
I'm
about is a
looking at
return on
even the fuel,
investment.
you're fixing to spend
Yeah.
$1.5 million to relocate the fuel barn. How long is it gonna take to pay for that?
If we had to pay for all of it, rather than.
Well, I understand, but I'm just saying from a business stand, if I was gonna make a
Absolutely.
$20 million investment,
Yeah.
what's in it for us?
And sir, that is one of the reasons why we have difficulty
And
getting
I know
third-party
that, you know,
partners.
bringing, you know, the businesses in, I mean, there's more to the equation than just, it's kind of like the city park. There's more to it than that, but,
We've had several inquiries, for instance, to build T hangars, for like a third-party partner would build T hangars, then turn around and lease them out to aircraft owners. And when they look at the going rate for the rent that they could receive, they make the decision that I think you would make, which is that there's a very limited opportunity to return on your investment. And so that's one of the reasons why municipalities, airport authorities tend to be the responsible party for development, because the return on the investment is very, very long-term.
you know.
Who sets our lease rates? Where do we get those numbers?
Each year, we participate in a statewide survey to see what all of our neighbors are charging for similar properties. And we try to stay in that mix so that we're relevant, so that we understand certainly location helps, and we can go a little higher in places that don't offer both full service and self-service fuel. We also look at the amenities that are available, and we have an escalation clause in all of our hangar leases that each year at the beginning of the fiscal year, based on the prior year's CPI, we can and do raise the individual rental rates. But we need to stay within an acceptable market share per the FAA policy on aeronautical use. The FAA's position is that they invest millions and millions of dollars in the runways and taxiways, and that the airport needs to be available for people to use it. And so that as necessary, we can charge what it takes to keep the facility operational. That's perfectly fine, but that we need to take into consideration that they're there because the FAA is there, and the FAA would like us to put as much of the cost burden of operating the airport on non-aeronautical users as possible.
Well, I'm looking at all the costs we have, and I'm with these guys. We're gonna have to increase rent or something.
Well, I mean, I had a question for Mark. Is a golf cart really 15 grand?
No,
Okay.
we can do a side by side, look for less money than that. And the other side of that is we have loaner programs, you know, I've talked to the police chief about it, to where we can loan stuff to them, we get a discount on the product. You know, so there's a way around that to where you have no outgo and you keep new equipment out there.
And I'm sure that's an excellent opportunity. The number that we have in here came from the state catalog list.
Okay.
So.
So that's
if-
not really what I
And
call,
then-
what I consider a tug, like you said, a conventional tug. We get by with what we get by, I understand, but, I mean,
Yes, well, like I said, we looked at the available products on the state catalog list when we put the budget number together.
Which kind of like the tractor stores, spending $20,000, why don't we, when we do the or the terminal, why don't you have a garage door to be able to pull the
Yeah.
thing in?
Or a lean-to or
I mean-
something, even a lean-to would
I
work,
mean,
it just
you
needs
know,
to be
that needs to
covered.
be integrated in more than just, we're gonna build a bin out here and put the tractor in.
So this tractor we've got is brand new, pretty much.
Fairly so.
Set outside.
And so are we cutting the grass ourselves out there? or
We
what?
do have a combination. We have areas that staff, myself and Katie, who's the current staff, we cut, and we also have areas that we lease out for hay production.
So this tractor's not for the whole compound, it's just for the part that's not being hayed?
Yes, so that's the entire infield.
Okay,
All of the areas that you could sort of see from the street that are adjacent to the terminal area, there's several plots of that on that we don't put in the hay lease. The hay lease is primarily the wide open stretches on the west side to the north of the runway and a section in the southeast quadrant.
okay.
So there's quite a bit that we do with it, and we are responsible for ensuring that the infield is cut at all times because the lights and the navigational aids can't have interference from tall grass. And then there's also the wildlife issue that comes with letting it get too long.
So I'm gonna assume we have insurance on this tractor.
We do.
And what was our initial purchase price on that, do you remember?
$60,000.
50, 60 grand,
That's
okay.
110 horse, I think.
Okay. And that included the brush hog, or was that separate?
No, the brush hog was separate.
Okay, that's another 5, probably,
At least.
maybe 10.
I think it was close
It's
to
pretty wide,
10.
it looks like a
But this-
6 or 7 footer. Okay. The cars, this is all new, that's why I'm asking, and I think this is the first we've all seen this. The pickup, can you give us a overview of what we're using that for?
Well, of the three ground vehicles that we keep there, we have the operations vehicle, which is what we do, just pretty much anything on the airfield. You go to work in the morning, you hang up your lunch bag, you get in the truck, you go do a runway inspection, you check all the
Okay.
lights. It has air-to-ground radio, function in it. We use it throughout the course of the day to get to and from work areas, if somebody takes the tractor out, for instance, and it's better just leave it where it is, go grab them for lunch, come back. It's equipped to work on the airfield, on the active, in and around the airplanes portion of the day. The other two vehicles, we keep those for, we call them courtesy or crew cars. So standard use is we have a lot of pipeliners that come in. They'll come in, they're working the route for the day, they want to grab a bite to eat, they'll come in, they'll drop the plane, they'll grab the crew car, they'll go to Brahms or somewhere, get a burger, we fill up the plane with fuel while they're gone, they come back, hand us the keys and go. We have guests who come in for business meetings, and I know, and we put them in the expedition, but it's better than nothing.
Better than walking.
It is better than walking.
Have you been in that expedition?
Hey, it's still
I've
better
been in
than
that
walking.
expedition.
It's better than walking, and so we do reserve them for use. Say, for instance, today we had a family come in, unfortunately, for a family funeral event. There were 4 of them, so they took the expedition. Just anybody's coming in for business, somebody who needs to do a meeting downtown, a meeting, here in Shawnee, maybe they're going to pick up a car somewhere. We get a lot of people who come in for purchasing vehicles in the area. People coming into, I've got a gentleman who's a pecan grower, and he flies his pecans in, he loads them in our pickup truck, which is the courtesy car, takes them down to get them shelled, flies back in, picks them up once they're shelled, and flies them home. It's just all sorts of uses. Our guests at the airport, when they arrive, they're going to be with us here in Shawnee an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours maybe. They'll take one of these cars, go do their business, and come back.
Yeah, it's pretty convenient.
Sure.
Pretty standard, too.
You said the tenants in Hangar 15 were no longer there. What did we do with them? Did
They requested to terminate their lease because the
So they
building
just
was.
moved out?
They just moved out. Yeah.
Okay. And what about Hangar 16? Isn't that the big yellow?
Hangar 60, yes, sir, it's the
World War
big
II
yellow
hangar?
one. Pardon?
That's the big yellow one, Hangar
That's the big-
16?
Hangar 16 is the big yellow one, and it is so far away from an answer. We have been asked to conduct yet another
That's the one we're,
assessment of the
Okay.
piers to determine its future. It was just so amorphous, it's not worth even including in the presentation.
okay.
There's just no answers associated with it.
So do we know how much FEMA money and
Insurance money and,
that we're gonna have toward this?
Yeah. Wasn't there an email about that?
there is information, and that would also be part of the next item.
Okay. Which I saw some of that, but
Is my understanding, sir, that we have some information and that there's some still pending?
it's still an open-ended deal, I'm sure.
Very much so.
For the next few
insurance,
years.
particularly because the insurance company keeps saying, well, you know, well, let us take another look at it.
Which, you know, the sad thing, a lot of that stuff was really old that was out there. So what was the actual value and how damaged was it before this happened, which it wasn't brand-new buildings that we're dealing with.
And some of the questions that the insurance company has rightfully asked is, you know, is this damage or is this evidence of a prior repair? And again, these are our premiums that we're paying, so we certainly want to work in coordination with them and see what can be done best for everybody involved.
Which, you know, kind of bottom line, the state thinks it's worth putting a lot of money into, which is a plus. So, you know, and for what it costs the city to do this is.
That's a good return on investment.
Exactly, because the state's who's taking the biggest majority of the risk here, and then we have a lot of insurance money, even though we have these numbers hanging out there, a lot of that's gonna be insurance money. So I guess.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I've been working on this for probably just over a year. A couple of things I'll bring to this discussion. I think it's important, we found a good partner in the state. There were nine projects, I believe, in the state budget. Ours was one of them, and one of the largest in the last budget. We're in a unique situation because we do have insurance and FEMA money that will help account for it. I think if we think about the last meeting we were in, technically, I guess, where we talked about funding sources, you know, I think staff is being responsible to look at the risk we could have for cost overruns and what it's going to cost, and some of it we don't know. And but I think maybe the important scope of the project, when you talk about the state being interested here, for the first time when we look at airport usage, and we're now like their capacity in the metro is shrinking, and when they're looking for opportunities for growth as aerospace is rapidly increasing in the state. And here we are with land, and we're close to the metro. And so this is the first appearance I've seen of kind of, we're being lumped into the metro airports, which is really good for our potential. And so I see a lot of potential here. I mean, I think we want to be fiscally responsible, and I think staff's done a good job of outlining what that could look like. But I think we also have to recognize we're at the crux of an opportunity where we have FEMA dollars available, insurance dollars available to help, which count as local money in this situation. And the state has stepped up in a large way and made it, so it's giving us kind of a generational expansion opportunity. It's not without risk, but to me it is, I think it could be something that, you know, of all the good we've done, or I will have done by the time I'm done here, it could be generationally impactful. And so I'm really excited about it, and I think it's a good direction for us to head.
What kind of personnel we're gonna need to maintain this after? I mean, you're gonna need more people. Any kind of projection on that?
Help me understand the question, because.
Just to maintain the property, once you have more facilities, there's gonna be more maintenance, more stuff going on.
That is true, and I think that is an ongoing cost that will have to be built into future budgets. Again, it
Which
is
hopefully
very
the-
standard, if I give you a hangar, if I build it, then the maintenance rests with the city, with the airport authority. If I give you an opportunity to build it yourself, or perhaps I lease it to you, and in that lease agreement negotiation, I might say, okay, for me to be able to generate the continued necessary maintenance, would require me to put on staff dedicated to that, which they may not have something to do 8 hours every single day. So it may be more worthwhile to write a negotiated agreement to say, if you'd like to occupy our hangar for your business use, this much in cash, and then, you know, responsibility for the day-to-day overall maintenance could be put onto a leasing tenant. And that has worked for us with some of our buildings. That's kept us from having that staff requirement, additional staff requirement. I will say this, because I think it's really important. We have had a lot of help, and we do get help routinely from the teams here in the different city offices. If we've got something that needs to be done and they have the equipment, we work the budget across the line to make sure that, for instance, we did this enormous amount of work on the 100 T-hangers on the south side. It had been used forever and forever as the best construction pathway for anything being built on the airfield, and it was in very, very challenged condition. And working with my colleague, Mr. Schmidt, and his team, we were able to move some of the funds from the Airport Authority Fund over to the Municipal Authority Fund to pay for the concrete and some of the labor to do some of that work in-house. Same thing with some recent repairs we did with some of the asphalt areas. We were able to get the gentleman from the streets team to come help us with that. So we do balance out those needs for having full-time staff just dedicated strictly to maintenance. There is stuff to be done, but usually, sir, it's stuff that needs to be done with that kind of capacity, scale, maintaining the pavement, painting the pavements. This is something we would usually, if we can get it into the schedule for Public Works, if it's beyond their equipment and personnel capacity, obviously we bid it out. So we do try to address some of those things in partnership with some of the city services. The more day-to-day maintenance, grass cutting, light bulb changing, coyote management, that's all taken care of by the airport staff. Katie and I just get it. We just do it in between fueling airplanes.
So how do they move the airplane? I mean, do you guys tug all the airplanes that come into the hangars, or the tenants responsible for moving their own stuff in and out?
We assist tenants at a request when tenants request it. I will tell you that since the storm, the only box hangar that's still left that we can offer to tenants for covered space is the hangar 14, which is adjacent to the terminal. And it is snugger than we would like, but we're able to accommodate a few more aircraft as a result. We do try our level best to tug them out for them, because usually what you're talking about is your airplane might be behind two others. And so as a little bit more than a courtesy, just trying to work with giving the most amount of cover to the most amount of aircraft, it can be a little bit like a Jenga game. And so we use it for that purpose. Certainly we use it to reposition aircraft on the parking ramp. For instance, someone may come in, they want to go to a meeting, we'll tell them it's fine, just sort of leave it in the middle of everything. We'll fuel it with a truck, and then we'll use the tug to reposition it to tie-down location for them and get them secured that way, so the center of the ramp is not available for the next customer. We do have customers who ask us to come assist them getting them out of their own T-hangers. Some of the T-hangers that are still standing are short but wide, and so we've accommodated some of our wider wing aircraft in there. But by wider wing, I don't necessarily mean wider doors, and there can be a little bit of a snugness in there. So we'll use it to help them on their request. Hey, they'll give us a call, could I get a wing walker? Could you guys come help me? Because if you're using sort of the hand pushing, sometimes they can wobble over the rails a little bit, and you get a little hanger rash on your tips, and that's never a good thing.
Which is, how heavy are these aircraft?
It depends. We've moved as big as Citation 3s if we have to.
What's the weight of one of those?
Well, somewhere between 20,000 30,000 pounds, depending whether there's fuel in it or not. It's the reason that we use the little tug like we do is because, frankly, most of our aircraft that we're using it is in tight spaces, and they're smaller
Right.
aircraft.
But you know where I'm getting at more, like, what are we moving? Because that golf cart's not gonna move that Citation.
It is not, and we do have a wheel-based one that is intended for the larger, almost up to a regional jet. It moves
small stuff's
very,
what you
very
mean.
slowly, and it's very cumbersome, and you cannot really maneuver the inside the hangars with that one, but we do take that one out for the bigger jets as needed.
We'll have this conversation later. I'm gonna loan you something.
I would be thrilled to pieces to get a better deal than what, like I said, the budget when we put it together, we were looking at those equipment available readily on state catalog.
Well, the manufacturers recommend it's good PR. You know, you see that out there for that aspect, it gets a world, so they're, they want a return on their investment because they'll help us with doing it. But, the other side of that, you'll sell some units because of it.
If you help us with the tractor get a better deal, so I'm not gonna say no to your help getting us a tug for a better deal for sure.
Okay.
So we know our hangar 15 tenant just canceled out the lease or whatever, right? So I know hangar 16 is basically total. Was that occupied when the tornado came through?
It was, and the hangar 100 tenant lost so many airplanes in the storm that they asked to be released from their lease. So the Hangar 16 tenant was relocated to the Hangar 100 space, which is about half of the size of the space of Hangar 16. So they're kind of making that work with a lot of indoor, outdoor aircraft movement. They bring one in to work on it, take it back out while they're waiting for a part, bring the next one in, work on that, wait for the part, or complete the work and send it back to its owner. We're very flexible. We're very flexible out there. We find all kinds of creative ways to get as much done as we can.
The last thing I had about was the DPS building. Was it occupied when the tornado came through?
It was.
Okay, and that's where we're losing our 48 grand or
Yes,
4,000
sir,
a
that's
month?
correct.
That's a
Okay.
year, it's annually.
Vive was gone already, correct?
No,
Yeah,
ma'am.
it's 4,000
Five didn't
a month.
leave until September of this year, ma'am.
No, 48,000 annually, 4,000 a month.
The DPS canceled the contract, it was a state lease, so they call it a contract, they canceled that. I want to say May of '23 or maybe June by the time we got the paperwork done. But Vive Broadband terminated their agreement with us in September of this year, ma'am. Yeah, but Vive still does have a land lease with the airport on Saratoga.
Yeah.
There's a facility on the corner of
Right.
Saratoga and Airport Drive. That's a completely separate
Right.
function for Vive. They are, yes ma'am, very much. I think they've done some renovations in there recently as well. We do not own that building. We lease the land to Vive and they've done all of the construction on that. I've heard it referred to as the head end, the call center, some administrative offices were based in the 1821 location.
The call center, yeah.
I don't know that you ever saw the Vive people there because they're on the other end of the headphone, but yeah, they had done some refurbishment and reorganization of that building earlier in their lease to modify it to their needs, and they kept the administrative regional staff was when the office is facing the roadway, and then there's sort of a sunken section, which I believe used to be the mess hall for the armory, because it's a fairly nice kitchen attached to it, where they had the call center set up.
So we own the big DPS building beside Shawnee Theater? City owns that?
We do,
Okay.
the
And is
land
it-
and the building, yes, sir.
Is it totaled, or is it repairable, or,
That is a question still to be answered by what we can do about it. The insurance assessment was very small. I don't think they took into consideration much of the interior damage or the fact that there's still weather entering the building pretty routinely. And I think that if we do get to a point where we can reuse the building, it is going to be a pretty heavy lift on reorganizing the interior. Certainly the floors and carpeting are unpleasant.
Yeah.
There's sections that the glass has been broken. There's a section of the brick wall that faces the parking lot that there is a visible hole about that big in it. That same area, it appears that there might have been some wind damage because a gap has formed between the interior wall and the foundation, sort of on an angle. So I wouldn't say it's not salvageable. I would say that it has a lot of opportunity to be reutilized for various purposes. Once we identify what those are, we might be able to make a determination about the value of investing in restoration.
Do you know what the square footage of that building is? If you don't, that's fine. I know
I'm sorry,
that's
not
good.
off my head.
That's fine.
it's pretty big.
It's pretty
It
big,
is
yeah.
big.
I was
It's
thinking it's
very
pretty
big.
big.
It's
Was
a
a
little
very nice
misleading
building.
because it's an H shape.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And if you see it from one angle, it looks one
Right.
size, another size, but if you see it from above, you can see it's an H shape.
But it does have, it has
I
some
do remember it
substantial.
being pretty big, yeah.
I think it almost like 12,000 square feet.
One question, one comment for me, then I'm done. Do we have, through OMAG, does that include loss of use coverage? You identify lease amounts we're losing. Does our,
We're
like,
injured for that
I know that we
48,000.
have compiled, to answer your question, what I believe you're asking me is, you're asking for loss of use coverage. I know that, that staff, myself and Katie, we've spent a lot of time going through making sure that all of the leases that were impacted by the storm for however long they were impacted, as well as those that have been terminated as a result. We have compiled that information, and I do believe it has been submitted for consideration by OMAG. I cannot give you an intelligent answer as to how much of that may or may not be addressed.
but we have the coverage.
It was part of the premium payment is what he's asking.
So,
Like on my commercial policy, I have loss of use, where if I'm displaced, I'm gonna get a percentage of my revenue.
Off the top of my head, I do not remember. I know that we have already received from OMAG a loss of operational funding
Okay.
disbursement that was just shy of 250,000 very early on. But I could not intelligently speak to the additional coverage without going and reading the
That's great.
coverage
I'm
again.
just curious.
Yeah.
Some of them have like limited time frames.
Yeah, they've got 12
which-
months or whatever, yeah.
So it could be 3 months,
Yeah.
could be 6 months, could be, so if, and we're, obviously if it's 6 months, we're
Already
far
past
past that,
that.
so.
My other comment, and then I'll shut up and someone else can talk. I'm particularly excited about ODO 4, because we talk about which is the taxiway and then eventually you don't have to go to it.
I can't,
Like, I just look at it as the
Okay.
opportunity for private growth, because we talk about the investment, it's a long game for a municipality, but we look at this, a nearly $3 million project that our share would be $136,000, but along that taxiway, there's so much potential for private companies to come in and build hangars, and, I mean, that's really, to me, the starter for the whole growth of that southeast quadrant of the airport. And so that's one I'm particularly excited about. I think it's a great partnership, a great identifying work by our friends at the state, and also putting their money where their mouth is to make it happen. And so just want to say that's one I'm particularly excited about, and where we'll make an initial small investment, but has potential to generate a lot of private investment as well. So
I think if you combine ODO 4, which is to construct the taxi lane that you speak of, and the hangar development in that area, with the ODO 7 and 8,
Right.
which is the critical roadway and infrastructure,
Right.
I will tell you that one of the things that has made private investment a little less attractive at the airport is the lack of widespread utility. I actually have good news, which is a little off topic, but it's not really new business because it's talking about hangar building. We finally got the obstruction office to be less obstructive at the FAA, and one of our new business partners has been given the go-ahead to build a private hangar immediately across from Hangar 15, so on an existing taxiway. And one of the concerns that they had obviously was that there is no water or sewer utility pulled to that area. Electric is pretty cheap and easy to get from where it is to where it needs to be. But he's building it with a rough out in case at some point we're able to do that. But that has been obstructed. So if you combine the ODO 4 that the Vice Mayor is speaking to with 7 and 8, which is the necessity for pulling utility in that area, I do believe you're correct, sir, that will drive
Right, yeah.
third-party interest. But
And-
that utility infrastructure will be absolutely essential.
Sure. And I just want to draw the public's attention to, because when we're talking about, weighing risk and city outlay on these two that are kind of tied together, ODO 4, project estimate 2.7, Airport Authority share 136,000, 7 and 8, a $9.2 million project, and our share 135,000. So we're looking at $12 million, and we're investing $250,000. That's a great opportunity that, in my mind, justifies some risk in other areas to make sure the overall plan happens. So I appreciate you bringing all that to us, and then I also appreciate, that we can look at the magnitude of the whole scope. So thank you for everyone from local to state, and then we'll put all of our collective efforts to go talk to our friends in Washington to make a couple of them happen. So,
Definitely one of the messages was well received.
but I think having done very little work in Washington, state and local playing well together and having big ideas is what drives the attention of our federal delegation, and so this will play well in that arena. I'm done.
Anybody else?
You too.
Are you sure?
No,
I know, we're holding you to that.
I'm a preacher, so you could have a second or third closing. Potentially an altar call and an offering.
Okay.
Thank you so much for the time to go through all of these with us. I know that we operate out there kind of, on the side of the road, but we do appreciate the support that you're giving to us.
Thank you, Mike. On to item number 2, consideration of alternative FEMA project designation for select Shawnee Regional Airport assets affected by the April 9th, 2023 tornado. Andrea's back up.
So I would really like to echo Commissioner Matthews' comment on the city working with ODAA being a great opportunity for the airport. You may remember that a lot of these projects that Bonnie again reiterated, you heard about those at the November meeting, where Executive Director Ardiz presented those to the Shawnee Airport Authority. You heard them again today. There was some concern about potential cash flow issues for the city, so staff is bringing this particular item to you as a potential to solve those cash flow issues. Stay with me for just a second. You know that as part of the April 19, 2023 tornado, city staff has been working very diligently with both the Oklahoma Emergency Management Department as well as the Federal Emergency Management Agency. Both of those, one being our state agency for emergency management and the other one, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, are offering funding assistance for the rebuilding and restoration of those assets that were damaged in Shawnee. We are part of their public assistance program. And usually that is a like-for-like restoration, to which FEMA offers 75% of the cost, and the state pitches in with a 12.5% of the required local match of 25%. But again, this is for like replacement for these public assistance programs, projects. In our specific case, there may be 3 potential projects that are airport related where a like may not be the best option, because the like requires us to front all of the money and then ask for the reimbursement from FEMA after the fact. So it really does not assist with the cash flow and the particularly, fast schedule that ODAA is proposing for the city of Shawnee. So there is an opportunity to ask FEMA for a potential designation as an alternative project, which would still get us to the 75%, albeit at a fixed cost. The like-for-like that FEMA usually participates on a reimbursement basis would cover any and all cost overruns at, again, the 75% participation. If we were to choose an alternative project where we get the money based on a fixed estimate up front and would have that money much faster and could implement these projects with ODAA's help much faster, the city would be on retainer for any cost overruns. I know that both while here speaking to the SAA during the November meeting, but then again during the Airport Advisory Board meeting, Director Ardiz has reiterated that ODA would be willing to assist us with any cost overruns if they should occur. Rather than waiting until the regular December meeting of the Shawnee Airport Authority, this is one that is more time sensitive, because if the city commission, or in this case the SAA trustees, tell city staff to pursue with FEMA a potential alternative project designation, we need to get this in as soon as possible, so as to not run up against deadlines. As a matter of fact, one of the deadlines has already passed, so we would have to ask very nicely, and there is no guarantee that they would accept an alternative project designation, but the sooner we can ask, the better. So with all of that said, again, there are 3 projects at the Shawnee Regional Airport that would present themselves for a consideration as alternative project designations at the airport. Again, that would be 75% of a fixed cost estimate, not ultimate reconstruction. So we and ODA would be responsible for any cost overruns. The 200 series T hangars, of course, as you heard Bonnie say, there are some concerns about reconstructing those in their current location, just simply because FAA underlying standards have changed and we have some distance issues there. So moving those over to a new location under the ODO 2 and 3 that were presented to you again this evening, that would be an option to reconstruct, as a matter of fact, 20 T hangars rather than just the 18, but it is not a like for like in FEMA's eyes. And then the airport terminal, again, shifting it to the east is also not a like for like. So locking it in at a fixed price estimate now and having that money ready sooner, if approved by FEMA, would help with the ODAA developed CIP. And then the last of the projects would be the, what is commonly referred to the indoor skate park, but really everybody knows it as the former Incredible Inflatables at 702 West Independence. Rebuilding that particular building in that location is not the highest and best use for that property, truly. So it does not make sense to reconstruct it, even though we may be able to extract all of its reconstruction cost, or 75% of that from FEMA, 12.5% from OEM. I think that particular parcel of land can be put to use at a much higher value. With the understanding that at this point in time, we do not have specs for any of these. We do not know exactly what the restoration cost will be. There is a risk that could potentially be entered into, speaking to what Commissioner Matthews mentioned. The other thing, OMAG has not yet indicated that they would still be willing to give us the recoverable depreciation, and for those buildings, the 200 Series T hangars or the airport terminal, together that recoverable depreciation, which we would only receive if those buildings were reconstructed and deemed as reconstructed by our insurance pool, would amount to $404,000 approximately. That is just clearly, it far exceeds the authority of the city manager to make such a call, which is why I am bringing this particular item to you. If you are instructing me to pursue the alternative project designation from FEMA for these three projects, that really has to come from the trustees of the Shawnee Airport Authority, just by virtue of the potential risk that we may be entering financially. It does exceed my authority of $50,000 to make that call. Again, it would allow us to have access to these FEMA funds sooner if approved by our federal entity, but there is no guarantee. The sooner we can get this request into them, the sooner we will find out, and that would tremendously help us with some of the cash flow issues that even the CIP in its current iteration as proposed by the ODAA would present at this time.
A couple things, I'll start out. I appreciate the careful consideration of the risk that we've made. When I look at, just talked about ODO 4 and 7 and 8, even our combined, because of the state support, even our combined share is still far below what would be a 90-10 or whatever if we did at the FAAs. Even if we had to eat all the risk, I still think we're on the good side. That's my opinion. But I appreciate your careful consideration because, if we were to fall into a tricky situation, we're talking about people's lives and jobs, and if the city were to have a shortfall. So I think you're doing your job by making us consider it very carefully, and I appreciate that. I'm comfortable with the risk. Like I said, it's under 90-10, even if and there's things we don't know. I think the bigger risk we run as a community is if the state feels that we're stuck in the mud and not going to move, we will lose far more over the long run if our airport doesn't become what we all believe it can become. And then the assurance, and I know political winds can change and there's risk involved in everything, but the assurance that the Director Ardes and the state have talked to us about, if there are overruns and FEMA and OMAG, they're willing to step in and help, I think mitigates a lot of the risks. So for me, I think we understand it's a risk, and I think, as you correctly stated, risk is for us, and it's not for staff, and so it's what I'm comfortable with. I hope my colleagues will support it, but I appreciate all the work that everybody's put into it, from Representative Curbs has been a good partner, Director Ardes has been a good partner, staff has been a good partner, my colleagues have been good partners, and I think we're on the cusp of something great. And, you have to strike while the iron's hot, and state agencies don't tend to give you their attention long-term. And so this is an opportunity for them to stake something long-term here. And we don't have to look 20 years down the road and say, well, we should have done it because look what that airport became. I think this is our opportunity, and this is when we can say yes. And so, instead of waiting on FEMA over $400,000, potentially if we had overruns, I think we strike while the iron's hot, we move, and we move the community of the airport forward.
And just to
No,
be
I'm really
clear,
not.
the state has offered to cash flow everything up front,
Yeah.
and we pay back when we get our,
So that is a different,
That's a
that is a
separate-
different topic. That, this is only about the project designation question for FEMA.
I agree with Commissioner Matthews. The risk is well worth the reward. I think we need to move and let's get it over with and get it done.
Get her done, they say, right?
There you go. So somebody need to make a motion to approve? I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
And just to make sure that we capture that motion correctly, the motion or the staff recommendation was to authorize the city manager to request the 428 alternative project designation from
From
FEMA.
FEMA, correct.
I'm excited about it. 2 hours.
Shown 3, hasn't voted mayor, now just the mayor. You have an off vote. You did. There's just a delay on it.
okay, motion carries 7-0. And with that, I think we're adjourned.
Dinner time.
Step kids.
Okay.